The AFL caravan is rolling to South Australia this week. 9 matches, it's gather round. We're going to be previewing all 9 matches, hopefully find you 9 winners. Stick around, enjoy, let me know what you think.
Welcome on in, everybody, to the All Aussie Rules Football Podcast. This is episode 21 of season 2025. It's round 5 of the football season. It's gather round in South Australia. It's a big weekend of football, and we're going to be previewing all 9 matches coming your way this weekend, as always. So we got those coming up today. We do 2 episodes a week for those that are new here. We have our preview episode that goes live every Thursday, and our review episode that comes out every Monday, reviewing the round's action. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all those things. Whether you're on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, make sure you check it all out. We got plenty of action coming your way in the next hour or so, previewing even all 9 matches. I don't think there's much else to say. Let's jump into it. First game of the round. Should be a cracker to start, to be honest. It might be one of the games of the round. Certainly should be one of the better ones. It's Adelaide Geelong, Thursday night football. You can see what time it's on there, depending where you are in the country of Australia. If you're elsewhere, then you might have to work that out yourself. But Thursday night football. It comes to Adelaide Oval. Obviously, all games in South Australia this week. And teams have been announced for this one, so we will quickly run through them. I record these on a Wednesday night for those that don't know, so therefore this will be the only match we have teams for so far. But Zach Taylor, Matt Crouch coming in for Adelaide. Going out are James Borley and Lachlan Murphy. 2 milestone games. Max Michelani and James Peatling coming off perhaps the best game of his career so far last week. And for Geelong, Blixarves comes back in after being a late out last week, and Mitch Nevitt also comes in. Out goes Jack Henry and Ted Closey. History of this matchup. They met twice last year for 2 wins to Geelong. The first one was over in Adelaide. It was round 2, right at the start of the season. And I think from memory it was a Friday night game. Adelaide never really looked like winning that one. They only lost by 19 points, but they never were really in that game at any point. It always kind of felt like Geelong were on top. And then they met again in round 21 last year, which, once again, Geelong won. Certainly not as convincingly. They only got the 5-point win. That was down at GMHBA Stadium, and there were multiple times in that game that it kind of looked like it might go the way of the Crows, but overall Geelong were the better team in that game, I think most would agree. But Adelaide took their chances and nearly stole that one. Going back to 2023, they met in round 8, Geelong home game, and Geelong won it by 26 points. So Geelong certainly have the wood over them over the last couple of years, going on that form, that history. But it is a home game here for Adelaide. They're going to start this one as favourites. They're obviously had a good start to their year. Geelong have had a bit of a hit and miss sort of start to the year, so it will be an interesting game, and I think a very important game for both teams going forward. Adelaide obviously started the season 3-1, won their first 3 games, scoring quite well in all 3. Maybe their defence not doing quite so well, but their offence certainly is. They obviously lost last week against Gold Coast, up on the Gold Coast. That's not a bad loss, though. Like, that one you completely forgive. Gold Coast barely lost a game at home last year. And, yeah, so it was a good performance. Gold Coast have also looked very good early season this year. Geelong, however, they're completely different. They obviously looked outstanding in round 1 when they smacked the Dockers, but followed that up with the losses to St Kilda and Brisbane. You can certainly forgive probably both. And then they came up against Melbourne last Friday night and won by 39 points, but it was pretty convincing. They never even looked like losing that one. So both teams looking to stay positive, I guess. Adelaide trying to go to 4-1, really set themselves up, and Geelong trying to go 3-2 instead of 2-3. So that's why it's an important game for both teams. Obviously, Adelaide getting the home game here certainly helps their chances, I think. But, I mean, you wouldn't write them off anywhere the way they're playing at the moment. If we look at the differences in team rankings at the moment, Adelaide are the number one ranked team in average All Aussie Rules ratings. So I do ratings for every game, for every players, for every team. And overall, Adelaide at the moment, so far from the 4 games they've played this year, are the number one ranked overall team, whereas Geelong are number 4. So even though they're 2-2, they have rated pretty well. Forward line wise is where Adelaide have been dominating. They're the number 1 forward line in the competition at the moment. Geelong's is 9th, so not spectacular but solid. The back line is going to be interesting here because Adelaide's isn't great. They're 15th, whereas Geelong's is 3rd. So that Geelong back line versus the Adelaide forward line, first Adelaide, third Geelong defence, will be very interesting and probably be the key to this match. The Adelaide forward line is obviously very difficult to stop and has been so far this year. Phil Thorpe is absolutely flying. Tex Walker's doing well. Darcy Fogarty's doing his job. Ben Keys has been outstanding. And then you've got Neil Bullen. You've got the forward line, the midfielders, going in. Whether Rankin's resting up forward or the midfielders just getting forward. Their forward line is what is winning them games, whereas Geelong's back line is probably their best part of their game. Midfield's probably not too much difference between them. Adelaide probably have the better star power. Geelong's midfield gets the job done most weeks, but 4th ranked Adelaide, Geelong's midfield is 8th. So that's just a look at the rankings heading into this week's game. What do we make of it? All these numbers, all these stats, what does it tell us? It could tell you a lot of things, I guess. It's going to be a good game. I think it'd be pretty silly to go against the home pick, but at the same time, Geelong, you can't write them off anywhere. If they play like they did in round 1 and round 4, they will be in this game. If you see more of what they did in round 2 or 3, they perhaps lose it. There's some good players in this game, and it's going to be a good game. I think it's potentially game of the round. There's maybe 3 matches that I think could potentially be the best match this weekend. Thursday night footy, though, we've had some good games, and this looks like it might be one of the better ones as well. So tune in Thursday night to Adelaide Geelong. My tips will be at the end of the episode. I'll go through all my tips. So we're going to do all 9 games. Then we'll do power rankings update, and then we will do my tips at the end. Don't forget also to hit up all my social medias. Instagram, we put up a post every day. Game days, we do wrap-ups of each match on there. And then during the week, we do Brownlow updates. We do Team of the Week updates. We do rookie rankings. We do all that stuff. So go check all that out. There's plenty of content over on Instagram. Also Twitter/X, Facebook. Actually, we don't really use Facebook, so ignore that one. But TikTok as well. Go check them all out. It's all Aussie Rules everywhere. Just search it up. You'll find us. We'll move on to game number 2. It's Friday night football. And this is a big game. Collingwood, Sydney. Adelaide Oval, Friday night football. Both teams looking okay so far this year. I wouldn't say outstanding, but both going okay. It's going to be a big game. Collingwood are currently looking like favourites for this one, even though they're going to have a few outs. Teams haven't been announced yet, but obviously Dan Houston's suspended again, so he's missing the next 2 weeks. Jordan De Goey's out with a foot injury. He was subbed out pretty early last week, just after halftime, I think, from memory. And then the third out is Lockie Schultz has done a hammy, so he's out for 2 to 3 weeks as well. So Collingwood are forced to make some changes, but they're still favourites going into this. They have a pretty good record at Adelaide Oval. I think they've won like their last 9 matches there. Don't hold me to that stat, but I believe that's correct. So that's certainly a positive for them going into this one. If you look at the record between these two teams, last year Sydney had the wood over them. They won both games, so they met in round 1, which was at the MCG, and Sydney played really well. Won it by 33 points. Collingwood were absolutely atrocious that day. They turned it over multiple times in their back line for goals. They just didn't look at all like they were playing the same game. They met again in Sydney in round 22, and Collingwood, I think, were 4 or so goals up at three-quarter time, or in that third final quarter, somewhere around there, and then just kind of fell apart a little bit. So they were 21 points up at three-quarter time and kicked the first goal of the last quarter, and then Sydney kicked the last 5 goals of the match to win it. So, Sydney took both games last year. You go back to 2023, obviously Collingwood won the premiership in 2023, and Collingwood did win that one by 29 points. That was in Melbourne. And then the year before, their last matchup of the year was in the prelim final that Sydney won by a couple points to put them through to the grand final, which they went on to lose against Geelong. So that's the history of these two teams over the last couple of years. Probably overall goes Sydney's way, in all honesty, but this is a different prospect. Neither team's home ground. We're in Adelaide. It's gather round. Sydney are going to be in the all-white kit. If you haven't seen that yet, go check it out on their social medias. It looks clean. Will it look clean on the footy field? We'll see on Friday night, but it looks like it might be an okay kit. Looking at these two teams so far this year, Collingwood obviously had the disastrous start where they lost by 52 points to GWS. But since then, it's all kind of gone their way. They beat Port Adelaide in Melbourne by 90-odd points. They then won by 6 points against the Doggies and 17 points against the Blues. So they're sitting 3-1. Obviously, all three teams that they beat aren't looking spectacular just yet. But, I mean, you can only beat who you play against. Meanwhile, Sydney, they started their season certainly not great. They lost by 20 points to Hawthorn in a game that they certainly should have probably been closer. They were right in that until the last quarter. They just made some mistakes and ended up losing that one by 20. They then played the Lions at home, as in Sydney's home game, and they lost by 4 points. Another game that perhaps they should have won. They just wasted chances. To be fair, Brisbane also wasted chances, but they'll still feel like they should have, could have won that one. And then the reverse happened the next week. They went over to Freo, played Freo, and got the 3-point win with a Joel Amartey goal late in that game. Pretty funny that he's kicked. Funny might not be the right word, but pretty crazy that he's kicked 2 game-winning goals in the last 5 or 6 games for them, having done it in the qualifying final against GWS. And then obviously last week they were outstanding. They showed their best form of the season, winning by 10 goals against North Melbourne, who didn't look great in that game, but North had been pretty solid up until that point. So a really, really good performance from them last week. Gives them a little bit of confidence, a little bit of form heading into this matchup with Collingwood. Certainly makes it look a little bit more interesting. I mean, both teams will find this a pretty important game. So far, rankings-wise, Collingwood are 8th and Sydney are 14th. They just haven't really got their season going. I know they're 2-2. The numbers just haven't rated well for them, but I mean, that's not the end of the world. Last year they were absolutely dominant in the ranking system, so we'll see how it plays out. The main reason we'll get to, we might as well lead with that, is their midfield. It's just not performing at the moment. Heaney's had spurts where he's been good. Chad Warner, likewise. Obviously, they're missing Errol Goulden. I think Rowbottom's been a little bit down so far this year. So their midfield's just not quite performing at the elite level that it was last year. Collingwood's midfield's ranked 10th. The forward, actually, across the board, they're pretty even. Like, forward line's Collingwood 10th and Sydney 12th. You take out Collingwood's round 1 or opening round game, and they're probably a little bit higher, although they've really only had that one good game as a forward line, which was against Port Adelaide. The backline's Collingwood 9th and Sydney 8th. The numbers suggest Collingwood win this, but some big outs, key outs. Dan Houston obviously is a massive out for Collingwood. Might sway our tip. Obviously, we'll do our tips at the end of the episode, but yeah, it's certainly shaping up as a good game, an interesting game, and one that is important for both teams. If Collingwood have a bit of a tough stretch coming up. Obviously, they got Sydney in Adelaide this week. They follow that up with Brisbane in Brisbane. Then they got Geelong at the MCG, the Bombers on Anzac Day, and then I think they head over to WA for Fremantle. So if they can go into that stretch 4-1, that would be huge for them. Meanwhile, if they're 3-2, all of a sudden they've got a bit more pressure on each one of those extra games. Sydney, meanwhile, they're 2-2. Their season can really get going. If they win this one, it'll be 3 wins in a row after a little bit of a slowish start where, I mean, they weren't playing bad football, they just weren't getting over the line. To go to 3-2 would be huge for them. Obviously, beat Collingwood twice last year, so you certainly wouldn't be writing them off in this one. Next game of the round is an early one on Saturday afternoon. It's North Melbourne Gold Coast. It's at Barossa Park. 12:35 Australian Eastern Standard Time kickoff, so pretty much a noon start over in South Australia, where the game is being held. North Melbourne Gold Coast. Gold Coast obviously going to go heavy favourites into this one. They're going to be wearing pink. I should put my pink top on. I do have a Gold Coast pink Guernsey, and I absolutely love it. And we'll be going hard on them this weekend. I think they surely win this. They don't lose to North Melbourne based on what we've seen so far this year. But that might be jumping the gun a little bit. Recent history between these two teams. North actually beat Gold Coast in round 17 last year, which was at Marvel Stadium when last year Gold Coast could not travel for the life of them. However, this year they've already won 2 games away from home. So we might as well make it 3. So, yeah, I expect a lot better from them. They also met in round 9 last year, and Gold Coast absolutely smoked them by 68 points. Looked a way better team on that day. And then going back to 2023, round 24, it was a nothing game. It was a dead rubber, but North Melbourne did win that one by 35 points. So they've won 2 of the last 3. However, 2024 Gold Coast and 2025 Gold Coast look like 2 different teams. They look like they're ready for that next step from what we've seen so far this year. And last week was a really gutsy win. North, obviously, they've only won the 1 game. They're 1-3. They lost to Bulldogs week 1 in a competitive game. They played pretty well. They only lost it by 16 points. Followed that up with an absolute smashing of the Melbourne Demons. They beat them by 60 points, which mainly was done in that last quarter. They were only 18 points up at 3-quarter time. Round 3, they were competitive against the Crows. The Crows, obviously, the much better outfit. Also, it was in Adelaide, but North Melbourne, they put up a solid fight. They lost it by about 40-odd points. And then last week was the disappointing one, I think, for them, because some people, including myself, had some hopes that we might see a really good competitive North Melbourne team put up a fight against Sydney, but they just kind of rolled over. They only had 12 scoring shots for the match, 8 goals 4, whereas Sydney were 18-9, so they got thrashed, never looked likely. Gold Coast, on the other hand, they're 3-0. Obviously, they had the delayed start from where they expected to start their season, with opening round being washed out, but they did play round 1 against West Coast, absolutely smoked them to the other side of the world. Over in the West, it was insanely good performance from them. I think they then had the bye and came back and played Melbourne in round 3, and they won that one by like 58 points, and once again, really good performance on the road. And then last week was their toughest challenge yet this season. They played against Adelaide, who were undefeated to that point, and they managed to beat them by 1 point. So a lot of things looking really good for Gold Coast, and you'd expect that they just go in and win this one. Like, they should win it. They're the better team. They're certainly playing better football than North Melbourne. There's not that many weaknesses in their lineup. If we have a look at the rankings across the 2 teams, Gold Coast second best overall team, North Melbourne 10th. So a bit of a difference there. The forward lines are both really good. North Melbourne's best attribute is their forward line. They've got the 4th best, whereas Gold Coast is 5th best. But backlines, Gold Coast backline's really good. They held up pretty solid last week against a really strong Adelaide forward line. They're the 5th best backline, whereas North Melbourne's is 13th, so that's a really big issue for them. And the midfield is where this game is going to be won. Gold Coast midfield is ranked 2nd so far this year. North Melbourne's is 13th. Gold Coast just have so many weapons in that midfield so far this year. And last year, but they really are contributing this year. So I think we're expecting a really good performance from this Gold Coast team come Saturday afternoon. I think that's everything we have for that game. So we'll jump into the next one, which is starting an hour later. So they do cross over a little bit here. And who saw this being one of the more important games of the round? Not for probably final spots, not for competitiveness, but which team wins their first game? It's Carlton, it's West Coast, it's Adelaide Oval, and wowee, who saw this start to the season? Carlton are going to be going in heavy favourites, which is to be expected, even though they haven't won a game. West Coast have been atrocious this year so far, but we'll get to that shortly. Interestingly enough, Carlton have only won 2 games out of their last 12 or 13 or whatever it is now. And one of them was against West Coast last year over in the West by 60 points. So, historically speaking, Carlton should win this. They've smacked them the last 3 times. 108 points in 2023, then 71 points in their second meeting in 2023, and then 65 points last year. That's 3 drubbings that Carlton have given West Coast over the last couple of years. Chuck in the fact that West Coast are looking atrocious at the moment. It doesn't read well for West Coast. I don't think. On paper, it certainly doesn't. However, before we jump into the 2 teams' season so far, West Coast last year, heading into gather round, I said looked like one of the worst teams we'd ever seen put on a football field. They were playing terrible football. Granted, I think they're playing worse this year. But last year's gather round, they didn't win, but they were very competitive against the Sydney team. And that kind of sparked them because they followed it up. I think the next week they played Richmond in WA and won that one by 30 points. And then the week after they played Fremantle and won that one, which was obviously the derby. So gather round was where they first showed glimmer, a just tiny little glimmer last year. So I'm not saying it will happen, but hopefully for West Coast and West Coast supporters' sake, this can be their glimmer. Hopefully they can come out and play a good game of football. So both teams going into this 0-4. Carlton had that disastrous loss to Richmond round 1, followed it up with an okay loss to Hawthorn, who are undefeated, followed it up with an 8-point loss to the Dogs, and then 17-point loss to Collingwood. So they've been competitive in every game. They've been a chance in every game, and that's why they're going to go into this one as favourites. Because West Coast have had 1 okay game and 3 absolutely horrible ones. They got smacked by Gold Coast round 1. They only lost by 19 points to Brisbane in what was a pretty good performance in all honesty. They were pretty good early. 40-odd point loss to Fremantle, which could have been 100 points in all honesty. And then an 80-odd point loss to GWS, where there were big chunks of that game. They just looked like they were witches' hats. They weren't even playing the game of football, the same game of football as GWS, who were just running rings around them. So that's the basis of this game. The numbers suggest Carlton win it. Rankings-wise, where are we? Carlton, 15th overall, West Coast 18th. No surprise that West Coast are 18th. Forward lines, both struggling so far this year. 12th for Carlton, 16th for West Coast. Carlton need to find a way to get this forward line functioning. Obviously, it has not been at full power yet. Obviously, Charlie Curnow missed the first couple. He comes in and Harry Mackay missed the next couple. So, with a bit of luck, they can get both of them on the park and start to find a way to get this forward line functioning, because it's not going well at the moment. They're 17th, West Coast 16th. Backline, Carlton's backline's going okay, in all honesty. It's not as good as it could be because they have one of the best key defenders in the competition in Jacob Wiedering, but it's still 12th overall. West Coast 14th, so slightly behind. And then the midfield battle is where Carlton should run away with this game. Another 6th best midfield this year. West Coast 18th. So that West Coast midfield is just really struggling. They're missing some key names in there, so you kind of understand it in a way. But yeah, this Carlton midfield should absolutely decimate the West Coast midfield based on what we've seen so far this year. I don't think I have much else to say about this game. We'll go to my tip at the end of the episode, but wowee, it could be a rough day for West Coast. Next game up is the evening time slot. It's Western Bulldogs Brisbane at Norwood Oval. Interesting that this game's at Norwood Oval. It should be actually a pretty good game. Bulldogs have been very competitive so far this year. Brisbane haven't lost a match yet. If we run down and have a look at the history of these two teams, they only typically meet once a year. Last year it was in Melbourne, and the Lions won it by about 40 points, 43. 2023, the Doggies won by 14 points once again in Melbourne. And in 2022 was up in Brisbane, and the Lions won that one by 41 points. So Brisbane probably have the slight wood on them over the last couple of years, but it's all the games. I mean, Brisbane have won two quite comfortably, I guess, and Bulldogs won the other one quite close. So far this year, Doggies have obviously started their season with an okay win against North. They then lost a tight one against Collingwood before beating Carlton, and then pretty competitive game over in the West against Fremantle, just to go down by 16 points. Not a bad result, seeing they're still missing so much talent. This team could be really dangerous once they do get Bontempelli, Treloar back into their lineup. And yeah, that could really, really make a massive difference. Meanwhile, jump over to Brisbane, now 4-0. Beat Sydney round 1. Wasn't the most outstanding performance of all time, 4-point victors. But they got the job done, and that's all they could do, really. Then they played West Coast. 19-point winners. Not their best performance again, but got the job done. 9-point winners over Geelong. Once again, nothing outstanding, but got the job done. And then 28-point winners over Richmond once again. Not the best football, but they got the 4 points. That's 16 points from 4 games. This time last year, well, I think they lost their first 3 before they won their 4th, from memory. Either way, last year they started really slow. They started barely winning a game, whereas this year they've done the reverse. They've still got a lot of things to work on. Their forward efficiency is really quite low. They struggle to convert their opportunities. They dominate field position. They can control the game, but they just struggle to convert it into scores. It means the opposition doesn't score much because they're controlling the game. But if they do manage to work out a way to get their forward efficiency up, they're going to be really dangerous. And last year they struggled with that area as well for most of the season. Around about round 9 or 10 they started to improve in that area. So if they can do that again this year, having already gone four wins to start the season instead of 0, good luck beating them. They're going to turn into a really good team, but they're not there yet. Brisbane will be favourites in this game, there's no doubt about it. 4-0 against an undermanned 2-2 Bulldogs. Looking at the rankings, overall, Brisbane 5th, whereas the Doggies are 12th. Forward line, Brisbane, as I said, their forward efficiency is struggling, and their forward line is struggling. They're the 13th best forward line, whereas the Doggies are 8th. Backline, though, Brisbane's backline is really good. They're 4th overall, whereas Bulldogs is 17th. Their backline is struggling so far this year. Midfield-wise, Brisbane number 1, Bulldogs number 9. So Bulldogs, if they could get Bontempelli and Treloar back, would certainly be better than ninth, but that's where they're at the moment. I think key area of this game is going to be that Sam Darcy matchup. I know it's the easy option to talk about. Can Harris Andrews or one of the other Brisbane line defenders stop? Did I say Sean Darcy? I meant Sam Darcy. If I did say Sean, I don't know what I said. But Sam Darcy, he's a freak. He's really tall. He's got good hands. He's got a good boot. And he's going to be hard to stop for everybody this season. And that's going to be the crucial thing, I think, for Brisbane. Bulldogs have obviously been carried by about 3 or 4 players so far this year. It's Tom Liberatore, it's Sam Darcy, it's Bailey Dale. Those 3 have been their key players this year. You stop them, and you might stop the Doggies for now, until they can get Bontempelli and Treloar and all these sort of players back. So yeah, that's where we have that one. We jump into Saturday night football. It's at Adelaide Oval. It's Melbourne Essendon. Certainly not shaping up as game of the round. Essendon currently favourites going into this one, and I think rightly so. Melbourne aren't looking great. History of these two teams: they met last year in round 18 in the pouring rain, and the Demons won that one. Even though the Bombers came back late, the Demons still won by 17 points. From memory, Nick Martin kicked 4 goals, or 3 or 4 goals in the last quarter, to get him back into the game a little bit, make it look a little bit more respectable, but it wasn't a great performance from the Dons. 2023, they met in round 5, and the Bombers won that one by 27 points. And then 2022, they met in round 3, and the Demons won that one by 29 points. So 2 wins to Melbourne, 1 to the Bombers over the last couple of years. This is a different one again. Being in Adelaide, it's Adelaide Oval, Saturday night football, and 1 win between the 2 teams heading into round 5. Not this start that either team wanted. Melbourne's start of the year was actually pretty good. They played against GWS and looked like they were going to win that one. They lost it by 3 points, but were certainly competitive most of the way. But then since then, it's been quite disappointing for them. They got smacked by North Melbourne in a final quarter onslaught. They got smacked by Gold Coast in the second half onslaught, and then quite comfortably got put away by Geelong. They played okay football. They kicked 6 goals 10, so if they had a kick straight, they might have been a little better, but in all honesty, Geelong was certainly the better team and won it comfortably by 39 points. The other side of the fence is the Bombers. They weren't terrible in round 1. They lost to Hawthorn by 26 odd points. Certainly were in the game most of the way. Followed that up with a very disappointing performance against Adelaide, where they just couldn't stop their opponents from scoring. Adelaide got to 161 offensively. Adelaide made 100 as well, so not too bad, but their defence or ability to stop the opposition from scoring was non-existent. Followed it up the next week in Melbourne again, this time against Port Adelaide, and did the exact opposite. Managed to stop their opponent scoring, kept Port Adelaide to 60 and got to 72 themselves. So they got their first win of the season. They go into this game 1-2, obviously playing 1 less game than most teams due to the fact that opening round was washed out and they missed out on that game against Gold Coast, which they play at the end of the season. Whereas Melbourne are 0-4 and struggling. So 1 win between the 2 teams. Doesn't read great heading into this one. It's the Saturday night game. It's the only Saturday night game though, so I mean, there's going to be plenty of eyes on it. Are we confident that it's going to be a good game? Probably not, but we can hope. A look at the rankings so far this season. 16th Melbourne, 13th Essendon. Doesn't read great for either team. Forward line, Melbourne's forward line is not looking good at all. They're the worst ranked forward line so far this year. Essendon's is 11th, which is okay, in all honesty. Back lines, Melbourne 7th, Essendon 18th. That Essendon one got ruined by that Adelaide game. Probably also got hurt by the Hawthorn game a little bit too, but they certainly showed better signs against Port Adelaide, so maybe, just maybe, they're on the improve there. The Essendon midfield is ranked third so far this year, led mainly by Zach Merritt, who's had 2 outstanding games and 1 really good game. And the Melbourne midfield is, even though it's very experienced and very strong, they don't have the depth is their issue. Clayton Oliver, Petrarca, Max Gawn, all doing really well. The rest of the team, there's just not enough depth in that midfield, in my opinion, which has hurt them so far this year. We move over to Sunday games. There's 3 of them. The first one is Richmond Fremantle at Barossa Park, starting pretty much on noon Adelaide time. And the Dockers will be going in heavy favourites into this one. Richmond have already achieved more than what most people thought they would this year. So that's a positive, I guess, for them. Anything else is bonuses. History of these 2 teams, naturally last year, Fremantle were a solid team, Richmond were not. So naturally Fremantle won them both by about 50 points. Back in 2023, over in the West, Richmond actually beat them by 15 points. I think Richmond finished 10th on the ladder that year. Fremantle must have finished outside the 8 as well, so similar sort of spot. But yeah, I mean, they're different teams than they were back then, though. Certainly Richmond's a lot different. Richmond started the year, obviously they beat Carlton round 1. That was a huge win for them. Followed it up with a couple absolute beltings. They got smacked by Port Adelaide, they got smacked by St Kilda. Showed some okay signs in those games, but overall just looked outclassed. But they were a lot better last week against Brisbane at the MCG. So 2 games they'll be happy with. 2 games maybe not so much. Fremantle on the other side of the fence, they've had a weird season so far. Round 1 got smashed by Geelong in what was a terrible performance. Round 2 they played Sydney over in the West and lost by 3 points. Should have done better, especially when they were about 4 goals up early in that game. Round 3 they got the job done against West Coast in the derby, but West Coast have not shown much this year. And round 4 they got the job done against the Bulldogs by 16 points, but once again not that convincing. So 3 out of their 4 games so far this year have been at Optus Stadium, and they're 2-2. So probably not the start they were hoping for this year. It's not a bad start to the year, but they probably wanted more from their first 4 weeks. But for them, they go into this game heavy favourites. They should go 3-2 after 5 rounds, and all of a sudden their season's looking a lot better after it started 0-2, and things looked quite bad for them at that point. Looking at the rankings of the 2 teams, neither team's sensational, but Fremantle obviously to be expected, much higher ranked. 17th to 11th overall, Fremantle on top there, 11th. Both forward lines struggling, even though Fremantle have some absolute talent in that forward line. It hasn't got going yet this year. At points it does, it looks okay, but then other points they just don't make use of their opportunities. 15th Richmond, 14th Fremantle. Backline, Richmond 16th, Fremantle 11th. And then the midfield is where Freo do their work. They still don't have... Well, Hayden Young might be back this week, I believe. He played Waffle last week, and they expect him to play in the seniors this week, so he'll add a lot to this midfield. Their midfield's the best midfield in the competition. It certainly was last year, so I expect it to be again this year once they get Hayden Young back. Fife's still not back yet. Sean Darcy hasn't played yet, so expect that midfield to get better as the season progresses, in my opinion. And Hayden Young, I'm a big fan of, so I expect him to come in and do a lot as well. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to predict Richmond winning this one or many other games this year. They are going to probably pop up every now and then and play a good game. Predicting when that's going to be is not going to be the easiest of tasks, I don't think. Second last game is at Norwood Oval. on Sunday afternoon. It's St Kilda, GWS, two teams that are going pretty well. One of them's a bit of a surprise. The other one certainly was to be expected. Sorry, I've kind of got a burp / hiccups going. But yeah, St Kilda, GWS. GWS obviously going in as favourites. St Kilda have been good, but GWS are expected to be one of the best teams in the competition this year. They met last year just the once in round 5. Was it Gather Round last year? Or was it the week before or week after? Week after, maybe. Yeah, the week after Gather Round last year. So Gather Round was round 4 last year. And then round 5 was at Manuka Oval. GWS won it by a point after being 5 goals up going into the last quarter. St Kilda flew home in the last 10 minutes, but just fell short. The year before, they met in week 1 of the finals. GWS won that one by 24 points. And then, obviously, they met earlier in the season in round 10. And St Kilda won that one by 12 points. So, GWS won the last couple, but certainly don't write St Kilda off based on that history. St Kilda started their year with I won't say disappointing loss, a 60-point loss, but weren't terrible against Adelaide. They weren't great. They got smacked in the first quarter and then lost the rest of the quarters, but not by as much. St Kilda then played Geelong at Marvel Stadium and won that one. They always play Geelong well at Marvel Stadium, so a good win there. Smoked Richmond in the second half, and then last week went over to Adelaide and played Port Adelaide. Won by 17 points, so that was a really good win, and a really good sign that they are developing this young team, to bounce back maybe quicker than people expected. I think a lot of people expected them to have a rough year this year, so a good start to their year, 3-1. Speaking of 3-1, GWS are also 3-1. They started their year with that dominant win against Collingwood by 52 points. Certainly looked really good that day. Then you got round 2. Round 1. Sorry, they played Melbourne in a rainy day at the MCG. Melbourne looked like they were going to beat them most of the way, but GWS came home hard and finished really well. Got a 3-point win. They then went down to a windy Launceston for a Saturday night game, whatever night of the week it was, Saturday I think. And Hawthorn beat them. They had a 5-goal lead, GWS, in the first quarter. They were kicking with the wind. But after that, they just kind of lost all shape. Even when they were kicking with the wind again, they just lost their structure and their shape. And in the end, Hawthorn played that ground really well, and Hawthorn won it by 12 points. And then they bounced back with an absolute dominant performance against West Coast. 80-point winners, looked outstanding the whole way through. So they certainly bounced back with really good performance. And based on that, it's hard to go against them, I think. If we have a look at the ratings of the two teams, St Kilda 7th overall this year, pretty solid from them. GWS 3rd. Both forward lines looking really good so far this year. St Kilda 6th, GWS 2nd. It looks like it's just going to work. The way they've built this forward line, it's full of guns. Stringer hasn't kicked a goal yet in his 2 games, but Jesse Hogan obviously kicked 9 last week. I think he kicked 4 in his first game of the year. Toby Green's popping up every week. Bedford, Darcy Jones, all these players are just popping up and doing their job. They're going to be tough to beat all year long, GWS. This forward line is really good. And their back line is as well. Both teams' back line is also pretty good. Number 1, GWS. Number 2 for St Kilda. And it's the midfields that perhaps aren't going that well. At times, GWS midfield looks really good. Tom Green, Finn O'Callaghan, a bunch of other players, but Josh Kelly, Kieran Briggs, you know the names. But I think they lack that little bit of depth and consistency in there so far this year. St Kilda's midfield, kind of the same. McRae has come in and been their key midfielder. Roland Marshall's been a little bit down so far this year. Obviously started the season under an injury cloud. Perhaps hasn't been at his best. But they're not terrible, but they certainly haven't been going great this year. So 12th for GWS, 14th for St Kilda. So both teams kind of match up similarly. It's going to be a battle of whose forward line can beat the opposition's back line, because both back lines are good, both forward lines are pretty good. And if one of the midfield teams really takes over the game, then they'll probably win the match. One final match of the round, ninth match. It's Sunday night. I don't like Sunday night football unless Monday is off. So it's going to mean that the podcast definitely won't be out until Monday night for the review episode, because we'll have to wait till this game finishes. Being that it starts at 7:20 Australian Eastern Standard Time, it's not going to be finished until basically 10 o'clock on a Sunday night, which is rough. But that's how it is. Port Adelaide, Hawthorn, Adelaide Oval, Sunday night football. It's must-watch football. Not because Port Adelaide are playing good football, but because of the spice that will be in this game. It's Hawthorn going to go in heavy favourites. There's spice between these two teams after the semi-final last year, where Kenny Boy got the Port Adelaide team over to the win over Hawthorn, and then rubbed it in their face a little bit. So fully expect Hawthorn to come out, kick a few goals in this one, win this match, and give it straight back to Kenny Boy. History, obviously they met in that semi-final game. Port Adelaide won it by 3 points. They met earlier in the year, also at Adelaide Oval. That was round 10. Port Adelaide won that one by a point. From memory, Port Adelaide were comfortably in front and Hawthorn came back. Or was it vice versa? No, it was vice versa, sorry. Hawthorn were way out in front. They were up by like 20-odd points at half-time. Still up by 28 points at three-quarter time. And then it was all Port Adelaide in the final quarter. They kicked 4-6 to 0-1 to win it. And 2 goals in about 20 seconds to finish the game. Willie Rioli got one. And then I think they had 21 seconds to score a goal to win the game. And they did it through Darcy Byrne-Jones to win by a point. So that was the other time they met last year. So they met twice over in Adelaide last year for a combined 2 wins for Port Adelaide by a combined total of 4 points. 2023, very different Hawthorn team, but they met over in Adelaide and Port Adelaide won it by 55 points. So very different teams from that though. It's so crazy that last year Hawthorn were knocked out of both final series in the AFL and AFLW by Port Adelaide. Who would have seen that coming? So Port Adelaide's start to the season this year was horrible. They lost by 91 points to Collingwood at the MCG. Followed it up with a bounce-back game by winning by about 80 points against Richmond, which meant that they were at about almost back to par after week 2. But then they followed it up going to Melbourne and losing to Essendon by 12 points in what was a really disappointing game. And then what was an even worse or even more disappointing result was last week in Adelaide against St Kilda. They lost by 17 points and never really looked like they were going to win that game, in all honesty. They did get within about a kick in that last quarter, but they were never the better team in that game. Hawthorn, meanwhile, they're flying. They're 4-0. Started their season with a 20-point win over Sydney in a tight contest. Both teams had their chances. Round 1, they beat Essendon by about 26 points. Looked the better team, but so they should in that one. Beat Carlton by 20 points. Not dominant, but they got the job done. And then 12-point winners over GWS in round 3, which was a really good performance. Both teams put it all out there, but Hawthorn were the better team on the night. They obviously had the bye last week, so coming off the bye going into this one, 4-0 against Port Adelaide, 1-3. Hawthorn going to be quite heavy favourites going into this. Port Adelaide have everything to play for, though. They need to show something because they haven't really done it yet this year. And will we see it here? Who knows? We got rankings for this game. Overall, Port Adelaide 9th, Hawthorn 6th, so Hawthorn slightly ahead there. That suggests Port Adelaide have probably been slightly better than their numbers suggest so far. Than their results suggest, sorry, not the numbers. Hawthorn's forward line going really well. 3rd best to 7th best for Port Adelaide. Backline, Hawthorn's is only 10th at the moment so far this year, which probably would surprise a few people. But they have been conceding. Their first couple, they conceded quite a lot. And then, obviously, the Carlton one was in the wet, so both teams scored quite low. And then round 3 was in Launceston on a really windy day, so another low score there. But their defence is good, but it hasn't ranked highly so far this year. But that might just be a bit of a blimp in the numbers. And then midfield-wise, Hawthorn's 7th, Port Adelaide 11th. Hawthorn's midfield depth is where they get teams. Newcomb, Will Day. Will Day's out though now, as is Warple, so they're going to be relying on this midfield depth to carry them through the next few weeks. But they have started 4-0, so if they do drop a game or two, it's not the end of the world. Is this one that they drop? I'm not going to call it an upset here, but Port Adelaide are going to have a lot to play for. Hawthorn are flying, but maybe this is it. Who knows? I could be way wrong there. So that's all 9 matches coming up this weekend. 9 crackers. We'll jump into my power rankings after round 4. And there they are. Brisbane stay on top. They haven't lost yet. I can't drop them down. Hawthorn obviously had the bye last week. They haven't lost yet either, but I mean, Brisbane started on top due to being premiers last year, so they stay on top. GWS move up a spot after dropping a spot, I think, the week before. Really dominant win against West Coast. They go up. Adelaide lost by a point, so they drop 1 spot. Unluckily, but I think that's how it has to go. Sydney didn't play, so they stay 5th. Collingwood beat Carlton. They stay 6th. Gold Coast obviously beat Adelaide, who are above them. They haven't lost a game yet this year, but they only go up to 7th. I can't warrant putting them above Collingwood and Sydney just yet, but things could change this week. Collingwood and Sydney play each other, so the loser of that probably will drop below Gold Coast. Geelong, they move back into the 8 after a really good win. Bulldogs dropped 2 spots, unluckily, but I think it has to be done. St Kilda, they're in 10th and right on the cusp of passing a couple teams, you'd think. Certainly Bulldogs. Fremantle 11th, they stay there. Bombers moved up 2 spots even though they didn't play a game of football, which is one of the most outstanding things you'll ever see. Who would think you can not show up 1 week and go up 2 spots? But they didn't get better, but obviously 2 teams were bad. Port Adelaide losing at home to St Kilda, they drop a spot. And as did Carlton. They lost to Collingwood, they were 0-4, they dropped down to 14th. They probably win this week. Maybe they move back above either Port Adelaide, Essendon, or both. North Melbourne 15th. They're not great, but they have shown some okay signs at time. Melbourne haven't won a game. They've been quite bad. And in all honesty, Richmond might go close to jumping them if Richmond can put in a good performance this weekend and Melbourne lose to Essendon. And then 18th, and a clear 18th at the moment, is the West Coast Eagles. At some point, I would imagine they will pass Richmond because they have more likelihood that they're going to win 3 games this year, whereas Richmond winning 3 is unlikely. But at the same time, what we've seen from West Coast so far this year is not great. So they're clear 18th at the moment. We'll jump into my footy tips for the weekend. There they are. Are we doing great this year? No. We're 24 out of 35. We got 6 out of 8 last week. We had 1 that we shouldn't have got wrong, but we did. We took a risk and we fell short. But this week we've gone Adelaide by 13 points over Geelong. So we've gone with the market there, really. Sydney by 8 against the market, against Collingwood. Gold Coast should be way too strong for North Melbourne. Carlton should be too strong for West Coast. Brisbane should be too good for Bulldogs based on what we've seen so far this year, especially with Bulldogs outs. Bombers win again here, I think. Melbourne just aren't showing me enough. Market suggests a close game. Probably will be close. Fremantle should be way too good for Richmond. GWS have only slightly put one foot wrong this year. St Kilda are playing good football, but this is probably their toughest opponent they've played this year, outside of maybe Adelaide in round one. And then Hawthorn should be too good for Port Adelaide. Should be, but we'll see. That's my tips for this week. Don't forget to let me know who you think will win this weekend. Any hot tips, chuck them in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video / podcast. Don't forget to rate it if you're on Spotify. Subscribe, all those things. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back on Monday, sorry. This is Thursday today. Monday with a review episode of all the gather round action. There's, 9 games to go through. Should be some really good football to discuss. So make sure you come back. Check that out. We'll go through all the stats, all the numbers. Check out my socials. Thanks again. This has been All Aussie Rules, episode 21 of 2025. I'll catch you on the next one.